And now for an official view from the European Union, Josep Borrell is the High Representative for Foreign Policy of the bloc. It's a position he's held since 2019. He was also in Brussels when I spoke with him earlier today. Mr. Borrell, thank you very much for talking with us. After seeing evidence of what the Russian military has done to Ukrainian civilians, is the EU this week going to agree to ban buying Russian coal?
Russian coal, yes, the ministers will approve on Monday, and now the technical groups are working on that. But certainly, it's going to be the first step. Well, in fact, it is part of our fifth package of sanctions. We have already taken a lot of them from the financial side, economic sectors. This is the first sanctions on the energy side.
And how much difference is this going to make in terms of decision-making by Mr. Putin and the people around him who are prosecuting this war?
Well, I am very much aware that the important issue for Putin is not coal, is mainly gas and oil. But, we have frozen the reserves of the Central Bank of Russia in the banks of the G7 countries. And that's why they have to start paying back their debts nominated in dollars or in euros. They are obliged to pay back on their currency in rubles. And I am sure the investors will not be very happy with that.
And I do want to ask you about that, but on this question of how much the Russian leadership is going to change its thinking as a result of what the EU is doing, you yourself are pointing out this week that the EU, in a way, European countries have been subsidizing the Russians by paying for energy. I think you said 35 billion euros since the war, just since the war began. And that's contrasted with the sanctions that you're trying to impose, which are much less.
Well, we are not subsidizing. We are paying. We are paying for the gas and oil they are selling us. It's not a subsidy, it's the price that we pay. And we are thinking how to get rid of that. But certainly we cannot cut gas imports overnight. Just imagine the case of some member states which rely on Russian gas for more than 50% of their consumption. They will reduce quickly, but you cannot close it overnight. It would be impossible.
I understand it can't be overnight, but how quickly can it happen? This war has been going on now for all these weeks. It looks, you had a forecast just this week that it could go on for years. How does Europe sustain continuing to do business with Russia? How quickly can Europe send the signal that it's just not going to tolerate this?
Well, business is a large word. From the economic and financial point of view, we are doing everything we can. On the energy sector, we hope that in a year, the consumption will be almost vanishing. But it will depend a lot on how quickly the US, will bring us gas to substitute the Russian gas.
But in a year, that's enough time for the Russians to inflict just unimaginable, not just death, destruction, even more than what we've already seen on Ukraine.
The capacity of the Russian army, it doesn't depend on the gas they are selling. They have enough resources, enough capacity to continue destroying for a while. The important thing is to arm the Ukrainians, and we are providing, all the member states are providing a lot of arms. And I think that thanks to these arms, also the US, but the 27 member states, thanks to these arms, the Ukrainians are resisting.
But as you know, Mr. Zelensky, President Zelensky is saying he's not getting enough in the way of weapons. He's asking for more anti-aircraft, anti-tank. You're going to be in Kyiv in coming days to talk to him. What do you say when he continues to make this argument?
Well, if I were on his place, I would say the same thing. Nothing is enough. When you are fighting in a war and you see what's happening to your country, you request for more. But we are doing everything we can in order to help Ukrainians without being part of the war. And you also have limitations. There are some materials that is very difficult to provide. Planes, for example. But without our support, the resistance of the Ukrainian army would have already reached an end. And certainly, President Zelensky wants more, and we will provide more as far as we don't get involved in a war.
And meanwhile, it's as we say, inflicting unimaginable, terrible things on the Ukrainian people. You mentioned currency a moment ago, Mr. Borrell. I want to ask you about that because Hungary is now saying Viktor Orban, its leader who's just been reelected, is saying they will pay Russia for energy in rubles, as Vladimir Putin has demanded. In other words, they're going to break away from the EU. Should Hungary continue to be in the EU?
Well, you know, the members of the European Union is not the same thing that the states of the United States. They have a much bigger degree of autonomy, and they can take decisions on their own on issues where there is not a concrete and binding decision taken by the Union. I regret that Hungary will do that, but they have the possibility of doing. In any case, Hungary is a small country inside the European Union. The quantitative importance of this decision is very small.
Last question. When you see President Zelensky this week, if he were to ask you, is the European Union doing everything it can to help Ukraine, what would your answer be?
At our level, at the level of the Union, we are doing everything we can, but we are ready to do more.
Josep Borrell, High Representative of the European Union, thank you very much.
Thank you.